Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast. As always, my name is Steven. I am your host. And joining me today is a very special guest, Mr. Sam Monson, a pro football focus analyst. Sam, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Really appreciate you hopping on today. Really quickly, I said, well, we'll talk about, free agency and kind of the draft stuff, but you guys are doing one of the cooler projects this offseason and your project with Aiden Hutchinson. Really kind of curious how, if you could kind of talk about where people can find that and kind of the process that PFF has done with Mr. Hutchinson as it pertains to him leading up to the draft.
Yeah, anywhere you get your podcasts, if you search for the Hutch podcast, the Hutch, that'll get you there. Basically, it's a 4 episode series that kind of details his background. Where he came from as a player, as a person, to become what we presume will be the number one overall pick in this upcoming draft. So Austin Gale is the host of it. He's talked to 50 or so different people. So a lot of his family, guys back in Michigan, Harbaugh, all these kind of people to try and flesh out the guy's story, and eventually we'll break cover on that really pretty soon now, as we get up to the draft.
Yeah, really looking forward to that one. I know most people, on social media have been hyping it up for sure. So I can't wait to listen to that one. Um, I want to get your thoughts really quickly on kind of the Chargers moves. I know that there was, this crazy offseason, right? Chargers ended up trading for Khalil Mack, signing JC Jackson, signing Sebastian Joseph Day, which I think were kind of the three big ones. I want to get your thoughts specifically on what JC Jackson can do for this secondary and kind of how you guys view that move over at Pro Football Focus.
Yeah, I really like that move. I think J.C. Jackson, first of all, I was surprised that the Patriots were willing to let him walk in the first
Yeah.
place. I understand that they're kind of pivoting away from the man heavy scheme that they've had over the last few years, and that kind of coaching tree has been the last bastion of, and they're moving to a more zone type of system. But I don't know that naturally means you move away from an elite ball hawking corner. I think you
Yeah.
need those in zone systems as well. It's not like you don't need coverage in that system. It's just a different style of coverage. So pretty amazed that New England was willing to let him walk and didn't want to pony up the cash it would take to pay him. But it's perfect for the Chargers because a guy like JC Jackson, he has been one of the best ball hawks in the NFL since he came into it. And sometimes those numbers have been, I think, a little bit flattering of his play relative to like his down in, down out coverage. But I think the longer he's gone on, the closer those two things have got to meeting. His play now is right up there with those interception numbers and the pass breakups and all those kinds of things. So he really is like a perfect fit within the secondary, and a guy that I think is also a pretty good kind of mentor and example for Asante Samuel Jr. because I think he's a similar style of player, and potentially those guys could really complement each other and create, this really talented turnover prone type of secondary.
Yeah, it really kind of leads up to a really interesting point. Brandon Staley is in Baton Rouge today, getting eyes on Derek Stingley. And I think, before signing JC Jackson, the Chargers were kind of heavily considered to be taking a corner in the first round. And, like you said, I did not think JC Jackson is going to be available. So, in my head, I was kind of picturing, like a Charvarius Ward and a draft pick to kind of, supplement this room. Not to say that that still can't happen, but there's a lot more intrigue now with the first round pick, and maybe they could still take a corner. I don't know if you have any thoughts there on whether Stingley can fall or whether Andrew Booth or Trent McDuffie are kind of worth that pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think Stingley is fascinating because he's a guy I could easily see going on a fall and draft day. Like, because of the way that his sort of college career profile panned out, the best freshman corner we've ever seen, PFF grade of 90 plus that year was absolutely phenomenal back in 2019. And then injuries and just play since, he hasn't really gotten close to that level since. But from everything we know about cornerback play from PFF data and from research and development, all those kinds of things, cornerback play year to year, it's not stable. It's not predictive. It fluctuates. It's volatile. It goes all over the place. And we've seen that from elite NFL corners. Jalen Ramsey is probably a perfect example. Jalen Ramsey in that 2017 Jacksonville defense was probably the best corner in the NFL that year. And then last season, he was the best corner in the NFL. But in between, his plays kind of been bouncing all over the place. We always knew that he was still the same guy, but he didn't necessarily produce at the same level. And that just happens with corners sometimes because you're automatically at the mercy of receivers and quarterbacks and offense and defense. And, that old adage of the perfect throw and catch beats the perfect coverage every time. You can go on a run where you're not playing any worse, but you're producing worse. So you're just getting beaten more often, which ultimately, it's a bottom line business for corners. So to me, the fact that Stingley showed that high end play is more important than when he showed it, right? So the fact that we've seen that he has elite top level potential, I think is way more important than if he'd done it in 2021. Yes, you'd love to see it that way
Right.
because that just fits the kind of pattern that we like to see from players. But the fact that we've seen it at all, I think is the most important thing. But I think there's a lot of I think that way of thinking is still not quite permeated through to everybody in the NFL. I think there's a lot of people that will shy away from him because the last 2 years weren't good and because the injuries, and won't let that 2019 sort of counteract that and keep him where I think he should be, which is the top 10 of this draft. So I could easily see a guy like Stingley start sliding in the first round and be one of those guys that a team like the Chargers or whoever pounces on lower in the draft and ends up with a potential steal just through value.
Yeah, I think we saw similar circumstances with Derwin James. I
Right.
mean, obviously there's positional value there, but Derwin had the similar health risk, if you will, that kind of led to him falling. So another player I'm curious to get your thoughts on. I know your colleague Mike Renner is very high on Charles Cross. There's been a lot of momentum, I guess, between the Chargers potentially trading up for a player like Charles Cross. What are your thoughts on Cross as a prospect and whether or not he would be kind of worth trading up for? Because a lot of Chargers fans are really desperate for that right tackle spot to be solved opposite of Rashawn Slater, and I do feel like there is kind of a drop off between Cross and the rest of that offensive tackle class.
Yeah, I really like Charles Cross. I think that he's the best pass blocker of this draft
Mm.
class. Like when you can, Ike Ekwonu is obviously the best run blocker of the group. I think Evan Neal is probably the best kind of compromise of run blocking and pass blocking. And then
Okay.
Charles Cross is the best pass protector of the group. But he's also the guy I think that's getting a little bit overlooked because of the attention on Ekwonu and on Evan Neal. And Charles Cross, I don't think is quite as sort of freaky in terms of the obvious stuff, just the size and athleticism and those kinds of things. And because of that, he's sort of falling under the radar a little bit. The two things I think that are issues. One, trading up, I think generally for anything other than a quarterback is just it's not a good idea because
Yeah.
you're giving up an extra pick for a player that isn't a quarterback to essentially be worth two players, two picks. It's just very difficult to do. The guy needs to be an absolute superstar in order for him to be worth the value of two players. In one pick. So I think generally, if you're trading up for a guy that isn't a quarterback, it's usually not a good idea. And then also, I think that he's the one guy from that top tier that's never played right tackle, which doesn't mean he can't do it. It happens all the time. You see guys get drafted, they move sides of the line, but you have to have a higher degree of confidence in that
Right.
if you've seen him do it before. So Evan Neal, we've seen him play really well at right tackle and left tackle at Alabama. Charles Cross, we've only seen play left tackle. So again, it's increasing, your discomfort, your how worried you are by a guy translating when you're adding these layers of things that could potentially go wrong. And while there's definitely a drop off, I think if you're factoring in the fact that you'd have to trade up and you're asking him to switch sides that he hasn't done yet, I think you're probably as well staying where you are and potentially snagging one of the guys like Trevor Penning or Bernard Ryman instead.
Yeah, absolutely. Really curious to see how the Chargers, kind of attack that. The other name really commonly connected to the Chargers still after free agency has obviously been Jordan Davis. Do you think signing Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Johnson would kind of preclude the Chargers from taking a guy like Jordan Davis because that would be, like their fourth defensive tackle at this point? And really, where do you end up seeing Davis, kind of falling in that top 15 or so picks.
I don't think it should stop them drafting a guy like him. If they love Jordan Davis, Sebastian Joseph Day, those guys should not stop you drafting a Jordan Davis if you think he's that good. But I think they've given themselves the ability to pass on Jordan Davis now if they don't love him, or if they want to go in a different direction, grab the tackle, grab a wide receiver, like if Jameson Williams or whatever starts to fall. They're no longer in a position where you're like, well, we need to draft Jordan Davis because we have this giant hole in the middle of the defense. The other move that they made, I think, that sort of sneakily affects the run game in a big way is Khalil Mack. Like, that guy's been one of the best run defending edge defenders in the NFL since he came into the league. He will make a material difference to the run game, like even without a big body up the middle. So I think they've done a good job of addressing that need. And then if they love Jordan Davis, sure. He's, I think, one of the most fascinating prospects in this draft because we're, the planet theory, Bill Parcells' idea of there's only so many human beings walking the earth of that size and speed and ability. That is Jordan Davis in a nutshell. Like, we have never seen a guy that's that big, that's 340, slimmed down 340, and can run like a 4.8 40 and set a record for, the best broad jump of a guy that's over 300 pounds, beat everybody at that size on the broad jump by like not just a little bit, by like a foot this year.
Right.
So we've never seen a player that can do that. But this is a guy that also has only really played 1,100 and something snaps in a 4-year college career, that has never been that productive, even against the run, which is the sort of one area you would expect him to just be flat out dominant in. He hasn't been. Like, the dominance is there in flashes, and his highlight reel is spectacular. But his PFF grades, even against the run, they're good, but they're not great. Players, if you start comparing him to guys that are like that in the past, the Vita Veas of the world, like, his grades are not anywhere near as good as Vita Vea's were coming out. And then you have the question about whether you can scale up his workload from 300 snaps a year to 700 snaps a year for him to be worth that high, the first round, the high end guy. I think because of the way the NFL works, a guy like Derek Brown getting drafted in the top 10 a couple of years ago, I think we're probably going to see somebody jump on Jordan Davis early just because of that potential, the chase of what he could be. But I wouldn't want to be the team that does it. I think I would be comfortable drafting him somewhere in the bottom half of the first round, but I would want no part of taking that gamble in the first half of the first round.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I land as well. We'll pivot away from the first round here with a couple other questions. I think everybody kind of knows the Chargers need more speed at the receiver position. It's why, somebody like Jameson Williams has been so fun at 17 potentially, although it kind of seems like he's trending towards not being there. In terms of that, third round, fourth round, who are some of your favorite kind of speed receivers that you think could be there for the Chargers, late in that day 2, early day 3 range?
I love Calvin Austin from Memphis. This guy is tiny. He's like 5'9", 150, 60 pounds, something like that. He's so small. We're talking like single-digit percentiles in size, weight, hand size, arm length, everything physical. But he is so fast. Like, he's in the 90-plus percentile in all the speed and explosive metrics, which you're going to need to have if you're that small, right? And you watch his tape, he's going to get kind of labeled as like a slot guy, a gadget player. He hasn't really played in the slot. Like, 90% of his snaps were out wide. And he reminds me a little bit of like, Santana Moss back in the day, but almost, I mean, Moss was a small guy himself, but like a small Santana Moss, a guy that's like even a smaller version of that, but somebody that can play outside and will scare teams because of his speed and his quickness. And when you watch him play at the Senior Bowl and those one-on-one drills, okay, those drills are set up to be wins for the receivers anyway, right? Because the corner has everything to defend. He has no kind of no way to cheat. So you're always going to see wide receivers get the wins generally, but defensive backs had no idea how to play Calvin Austin during that week. They couldn't figure out if you stay off, he just beats you with quickness on his routes and you're nowhere. If you get up and try and press him, he immediately beats you at the line. You're toast just as badly. They spent the entire week and couldn't figure out how to deal with him during the course of it in the practices. I think that'll translate for a guy that is going to fall because of his size. I think he's one of the rare athletes that can survive at the NFL level and survive outside against, big physical press man type of corners and have one of those careers. And, Santana Moss was the guy he reminds me of, but Deshaun Jackson is a really small receiver as well. And that guy's had
Yeah.
a decade-long career as like a designated deep threat and has always been productive.
Yeah, I think that's, and Calvin Austin is a good return man option as well. So that's going to make a lot of people on Chargers Twitter very happy. He's a very popular player on social media. My last question here really is about the running back group, because everybody on Chargers Twitter, like I said, is really interested in getting Austin Eckler some help. That has not really happened over the last 2 years. Joshua Kelly, Larry Roundtree just have not panned out. Justin Jackson can't stay on the field and is obviously a free agent. So what are your thoughts on this running back group, kind of outside of that, day 2 range? Maybe Chargers probably looking in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, that kind of range of running back.
Yeah, I think it's a solid group of running backs, and honestly, I think that's where it's most loaded, right? Is those kind of mid to low round guys where none of them blow you away, and you're looking at them and there's something missing to their game, whether it's receiving, whether it's incredible athleticism, whether it's straight line speed. There's something not there that makes them away from those top prospects like a Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker. But because of everything we know about running play in the NFL, that doesn't necessarily matter. They're still good, productive players, and if you have the run blocking, and if the offensive line is opening up holes, those guys will be able to come in and be productive. And that's the biggest thing for the Chargers, why they need to make sure that they kind of address the right side of the offensive line and make sure that that doesn't deteriorate, and that they are going to open up some holes for Austin Eckler and whoever the foil is. I think that's by far the biggest aspect of this. So yeah, there are going to be a selection of players, I think, available in the 4th, 5th, and 6th round. And it's just a case of picking the guy that they like the look of the best. And if the situation there is conducive to success, that guy will be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sam, this has been great, man. Where can Chargers fans find you, and what do you have coming up over the next couple weeks?
Yeah, on Twitter at PFF_Sam, on PFF.com, obviously, and then our podcast, the PFF NFL Podcast or the PFF NFL Daily, anywhere you search your podcasts. Obviously, it's full into draft season right now, so all draft all the time.
All right, yeah, can't wait to get there. I think we're 3 weeks away as of tomorrow, so really excited about that. Again, Sam, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Sure, thanks for having me.